everyone. So we have been discussing non-Western art, and we ended off while we were busy looking at the terracotta army in the art of China. If you're just joining us, please go back and just watch the first video, part one, for the beginning part of this non-Western art. Okay, so the terracotta army, we've discussed how these soldiers were made for the emperor in his afterlife to protect him. They were made out of terracotta, which is baked earth or baked clay. So all of these would have been fired and um, baked before they were put together, and then they would have been painted afterwards. Just the paint has worn off over time. So it consists of four main pits. So if we go back, you can see here one. So these are actually the corridors that we are talking about, the 11 corridors, not the four pits. So 11 corridors, each was 7 meters deep and 3 meters wide and paved with small bricks. So you can see the detail here. It wasn't just dug out of the stone or dug out of the earth, it was actually paved as well. There was wooden ceilings that were covered in reed mats and layers of clay, so ceilings were as well put in. Mounds of soil 3 meters high were formed on top. So that's basically from the top down to the start of this pit, there was 3 meters of soil. A collection of 120 objects from the pits have been traveling the world on display. So those would be on loan to different museums around the world. Okay, now we're going to move into the art of India. So the main figure that we're going to be looking at is the dancing Shiva, and we're going to look at two different renditions of the dancing Shiva. So Shiva would have been one of the Indian gods. So the Indian Hinduism believes in multiple gods that represent different aspects. So 2nd century BC, Hinduism began. So that is when it started. The rectangular temples were carved into hillsides like the temple at Badami. So this picture on the right hand side is from Badami. It is actually the shrine that is dedicated to Shiva in that temple. The focus is on the shrine at the back wall dedicated to Shiva, shown in cosmic dance. The cosmic dance would represent the destruction and the creation of the universe, and the arms would hold different objects, which would represent different things, or would be in specific positions. And these different positions in Hinduism are called mudra, which actually channel different things or connect your prayer to different parts. So connecting your prayer to your heart, connecting your prayer to your head, depending on where you would want to pray. And Shiva's dance is for the welfare of the world, so protecting the world, creating, destroying, and this constant cycle of destruction and creation. The sculpture is high relief, which means that it is flat at the back, okay, yet it pops out. Okay, so it's like a pop out on the rock face. It's not a three-dimensional sculpture, so at the back of this it would be flat. It is just slightly raised, which is high relief. So this is the second interpretation here. This is actually bronze, cast in bronze. We're going to look at this in a lot more detail. So the Hindus' belief was that Shiva is the supreme god, and they had three major gods: Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahman. I think Brahman is actually all-encompassing as well. Shiva dances with a ring of flame. So this is a typical presentation of Shiva, or typical depiction of Shiva. Each flame is identical, which shows repetition, and it keeps harmony in the sculpture. And this is an image that you can find in most Hindu homes or most Hindu religion. So at the bottom, you can see that we've got the face of a dwarf under Shiva's foot. So looking closely at the sculpture, we can see that Shiva's hands are in very delicate gestures, okay, almost feminine, okay, the way that Shiva is posed. In the one hand, on the left hand side, we've got a drum, okay, and the other two hands here are making gestures or mudra. The body appears realistic, so it's not distorted, it's not symbolic, it is actually quite realistic looking. The dwarf at the bottom here is holding a serpent, and on the right hand side, in Shiva's right hand, in it would be Shiva's left hand, would be a flame as well. The eyes are closed, and so slightly, if we look at the mouth, it is very, very slightly smiling, which shows calm and peace. There's also a serpent wrapped around Shiva's arm. If we look at Shiva's head, neck, arms, ankles, we've got all this very, very delicate jewelry. And like we saw in the previous slide, we've got Shiva standing on a dwarf who's looking up at Shiva. Right. So that is basically art of India. So this section is actually just a little bit of a taster of each of the different areas. Okay, it's not very in depth, it's just kind of an all round view of non Western art. So in Japan, we are going to be focusing on Buddhism. And with Buddhism, um, we are looking at the Buddha. So this is the depiction of the Buddha, not the fat guy. The fat guy would be the Buddhai. So Buddha is basically like the what's called like Muhammad and Jesus. I can't think of the word now, but basically the representation Messiah. I think the word I was looking for. So the Buddha is actually the Messiah of Buddhism, and instead of being a god himself, he is a bringer of the religion. So in the East, so India, China, Asia, that kind of area, we have Hinduism and Buddhism being our two predominant religions. So in 552, the ruler of Korea, Kudara, sent a gilt bronze figure of Buddha to Kimai, the emperor of Japan. And half a century later, so 500 years later, Buddhism was established in Japan. So it became quite a major religion there. We are going to look at this um, sculpture on the right hand side called the Buddha Amida Triad. And it was found in the shrine of Lady Tachibana. And it consists of three different figures. When Buddhists in China were persecuted in 845 AD, many sculptures were melted down. So, once again, like I said, the settlers come in with their religion. They say that any other religion is blasphemic. So, they go and they destroy anything that is related to that culture's religion. This makes the sculpture very important to religious and artistic styles. So it's actually one of the very few that would have still remained after the destruction that would have happened in 845 AD. Right, so looking at the Buddha Amida triad, we've got in the center Buddha Amida, and he is seated on a lotus flower. So this is a lotus flower, which is quite a popular symbol in the Buddhist religion. So on each side, we've got these other two figures. The one is called Kannon, and the other one is called Daiseshi, and they are also both standing on lotuses. On the screen behind, we've got the circular decorative pattern that is going around the Buddha's head, which basically would be similar to that of a halo seen in Christianity, showing divinity, showing that kind of holiness of the Buddha. If we look at the clothing and we look at the petals, we've got a very basic stylization. So it's very simplified. It has become a pattern of a representation of what that thing is. Behind the three figures, we've got a screen that is threefold. So if you look on the right here, you can actually see the hinges. So in other words, it actually folds, and it depicts low relief images. So on the actual screen, we've got more sculptures of nymphs seated on lotuses. So nymphs are little forest fairies or creatures. They could also be seen as little angels or things like that, um, with tiny forms of souls newly born to nirvana. So nirvana would be the Buddhist form of heaven, and they are holding these souls that have just recently passed. At the bottom of the sculpture, we have a plate that we can actually see like ripples on, which actually represents water, and it represents the Shukavati lake in the paradise of Buddha. Right, so now you're going to do activity 3.1 on page 106. You are going to look at religious symbols from different kinds of religions. Divide your page into 6 blocks, and you are going to research the symbols for Hindu, Buddhism, Christianity, and then 3 other beliefs, and try to make them ones that are quite old. So draw open into each of these blocks. So I think it should be draw with a pen in each of these 6 blocks. Use a pen to draw all the outlines. Okay, so you're going to draw 6 different religious symbols. 3 of those religious symbols need to be Hindu, Buddhism, and Christianity, and the other 3 are your choice. I will tag in the description for this video the documents that actually have all my answers, so you can see if you're on the right track and you can mark your own work.